Let's be honest for a moment. You spent the first 18 years of your life inside a building called school. You sat in chairs, you memorized facts, you took tests, you earned a piece of paper that, in the long history of wealth, has produced almost no millionaires, almost none. This is not an attack on teachers. The teachers, the textbooks, and the university advisors all serve one purpose: to produce competent workers for an economy that needs millions of them. They were never designed to produce wealthy people. If they had been, the people who run those institutions would be wealthy. They are not. Look at the salary of the average superintendent, the average dean, the average tenured professor. Comfortable, respectable, and almost without exception, financially nowhere near the people who never walked into their classrooms in the first place. You are, by design, the raw material on the conveyor belt. There are two curricula in this world. The first is the public curriculum, the one printed in textbooks, the one tested in standardized exams, reading, writing, arithmetic, history, useful in its way, necessary in its way, and entirely silent on the subject of how human beings actually accumulate wealth. Then there is the second curriculum. We call it the unwritten curriculum. It is taught nowhere, examined nowhere, graded nowhere. It is passed down generation by generation, in living rooms and back offices, between fathers and sons, between mothers and daughters, between mentors and the rare apprentice who knew enough to ask the right question. While the 99% are perfecting their resumes, the 1% are perfecting their structures. While the 99% are competing for promotions, the 1% are buying the buildings those promotions happen inside. While the 99% are arguing about taxes, the 1% are quietly engineering their lives so that taxes are someone else's problem. In the pages that follow, I am going to teach you 10 laws that were left out of every classroom you ever sat in. Not because your teachers were hiding them, because your teachers, in the overwhelming majority of cases, never learned them either. Warning: some of this will offend the part of you that still believes the world is fair. If you are not willing to be uncomfortable, this is your moment to leave. Law 1. The law of the long horizon. The first law contradicts the rhythm of modern life entirely. The rhythm of modern life is now. The unwritten curriculum operates on a different clock. The wealthy think in decades. The working person thinks in paychecks. This is not a personality trait. When you are paid every 2 weeks, you plan in 2-week increments. When your job could disappear next quarter, you cannot plan 3 years out. The horizon contracts to match the volatility. The wealthy escape this not by being smarter, but by being positioned differently. They have removed themselves from the volatility of the paycheck cycle, which means they can begin to think on the only time frame where wealth actually compounds. There is a clinical term for the opposite of this: hyperbolic discounting, the human tendency to massively overvalue immediate rewards and undervalue delayed ones. A worker offered $50 today or $100 in a year will, with surprising frequency, take the 50. A wealthy person takes the 100 without hesitation, not because the math is different, because their nervous system has been retrained to feel that the future is real. There is a famous experiment conducted in the 1970s at Stanford. A psychologist offered children, 4 years old, a single marshmallow on a table. They could eat it now, or wait 15 minutes alone in the room and receive 2 marshmallows when he returned. Most ate the first marshmallow within minutes. Roughly 1 in 3 held out, distracted themselves, and waited. The researchers followed those children for 40 years. The ones who waited on average scored higher on standardized tests, earned more income, and reported greater life satisfaction. The single act of choosing the future over the now at age 4 predicted financial outcomes 4 decades later. The wealthy are, in this profound sense, the adults who never stopped waiting for the second marshmallow. When you find yourself making a decision, ask, what does this look like across 10 years, 20, 40? Most decisions, when seen across that horizon, become embarrassingly clear. The thing that felt urgent at lunchtime becomes trivial across 40 years. The longer the game you are willing to play, the smaller the field of competitors becomes. By the time you are operating on a 30-year horizon, almost no one is competing with you. The 30-year horizon is nearly empty. Leadership Act 2. The law of ownership. The second law is the foundation underneath every other law. The public curriculum teaches you to be an employee, to get a good job, to work hard, to climb the ladder, to exchange hours for a salary year after year until retirement. The unwritten curriculum teaches one word: own. Andrew Carnegie said something worth thinking about often. 90% of all millionaires become so through owning real estate. More money has been made in real estate than in all industrial investments combined. He did not say this to be poetic. By his time, the data was already overwhelming. Here is the brutal truth. In every economy that has ever existed, wealth has flowed from those who use assets to those who own assets. The renter pays the owner, the borrower pays the lender, the employee enriches the employer. This is not a moral statement. It is the architecture of capitalism. I understood this in my late 20s. I walked into the small house I was renting and realized that the check I was writing every month was, in effect, my landlord's salary. He did nothing to earn it. He simply owned. I worked 40 hours a week to write that check. He worked roughly 8 hours a year to receive it. Within 12 months, I had bought a small 2-bedroom property of my own. Within 5 years, I owned 3. Look at the math. A working person who saves $100,000 in a savings account, earning 3% ends up, 40 years later, with approximately $326,000. The same person who buys a $100,000 property that produces rental income and appreciates at 4%, paid down by tenants, sees that same capital become conservatively between $2 and $3 million across the same 40 years. Same starting capital, same starting age, tenfold difference. The school you went to taught you to balance a checkbook and respect authority. It did not teach you that ownership is the single greatest force multiplier in the entire history of money. Stop renting your life. Start owning fragments of the world, a piece of a business, a piece of property, a piece of equity in something that produces value while you sleep. The size of the piece does not matter at first. The direction matters. You are either accumulating ownership or you are paying someone else who is. There is no third option. Law 3. The law of the hidden network. The third law most directly explains the gap between effort and outcome. The public curriculum says, work hard and you will be rewarded. The unwritten curriculum says, who you sit next to matters more than how hard you work. There is a sentence that captures this. Your net worth is your network. It sounds like a slogan, and it is. It also happens to be one of the most concrete, observable truths about wealth across the entire history of capitalism. Look at any billionaire's biography. Look at the years before the breakthrough. In almost every case, you will find 1 or 2 people whose presence at exactly the right moment shaped the entire trajectory. Not luck. Proximity. There is a clinical concept in sociology called peer convergence. The documented finding that human beings tend, over time, to converge financially, behaviorally, and aspirationally with the 5 people they spend the most voluntary time with. Not by intention, simply by exposure. Your spending patterns drift toward theirs. Your career ambitions drift toward theirs. Your sense of what is normal, all of it, drifts. If your closest 5 friends are working class, you will almost certainly retire working class. If your closest 5 include a small business owner, an investor, and a tradesman with a paid-off home, your trajectory will, within a decade, begin to resemble theirs. The most consequential financial decision I ever made was not an investment. It was the decision, in my early 30s, to begin attending the monthly meeting of a local investors' club. 12 men, mostly older, most of them owners of small businesses and small portfolios of property, modest by any external measure. For 10 years, I sat in that room one Tuesday a month and listened. I asked questions. I bought them coffee. I read the books they recommended. I made the mistakes they told me to avoid. By the time I was 40, my net worth had crossed thresholds I would never have reached on my own. Not because they handed me anything, because their reality had slowly and silently become my reality. I had been reinstalled into a different world, one Tuesday at a time. Stop spending your evenings with people who are exactly where you are. Spend them, even for a few hours a month, with people who are where you want to be in 20 years. Buy the coffee. Ask the questions. Listen more than you speak. Wealth is contagious in the same way poverty is contagious. The room you spend your time in is the room you eventually become. Law 4. The law of leverage. The 4th law is about how much force you can apply to your accumulation. Archimedes, 2,500 years ago, said it plainly. Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world. He was talking about physics. The unwritten curriculum applies it to capital. The public curriculum is terrified of leverage. Do not go into debt. Pay cash. Live within your means. Every line of conventional advice points toward financial smallness, toward the quiet horizon of a mortgage paid off in your 60s and a retirement that lasts as long as your savings hold out. The unwritten curriculum treats leverage as a tool, neither good nor bad, but extraordinarily powerful in the hands of someone who knows how to wield it. There are 3 forms of leverage. Most people know one. The wealthy use all 3. The first is capital leverage, borrowed money. A working family that buys a $400,000 house with $80,000 down has just used 5-to-1 leverage. If the asset appreciates 10%, they have made $40,000 on $80,000 of their own money. A 50% return. The bank, meanwhile, made roughly 4%. The second is labor leverage. The wealthy do not do all the work themselves. They hire. They delegate. The carpenter who hires 3 apprentices is no longer working with 2 hands. He is working with 8. The CEO who leads a 1,000-person organization is not 1,000 times smarter than his employees. He is 1,000 times more leveraged. The third, and this is the one your school definitely never mentioned, is zero marginal cost leverage, the leverage of the modern era. Code that runs without you. Content that distributes itself. A book written once and sold 10,000 times. A piece of software written once and used by 1 million people. A video recorded once and watched by 10 million. The working person sells 1 hour for 1 paycheck. The wealthy person, somewhere in his life, builds something that sells while he sleeps. There's a phrase the old industrialists used. I would rather earn 1% of 100 men's effort than 100% of my own. This is the entire game. A man with a shovel digs a hole. A man with a backhoe digs 1,000. The school you went to handed you a shovel and called it a career. You were always supposed to be operating the backhoe. Law 5. The law of the inner compass. The fifth law is the protective wall around every other law. Without it, the previous four eventually collapse. The unwritten curriculum has a name for it: the inner compass. Most working people make their financial decisions based on what their neighbors, co-workers, and relatives think. The car they buy, the house they live in, the clothes they wear. Almost every visible expense in the modern middle-class life is, at its root, a small payment made toward the opinion of strangers. Thorstein Veblen named this over 100 years ago. He called it conspicuous consumption. The act of buying things primarily to communicate one's status to people who, in most cases, do not care. The wealthy long ago discovered that this is a financial dead end, so they made a quiet substitution. They stopped optimizing for the outer scorecard, what others thought of them, and started optimizing for the inner scorecard, what they themselves knew to be true. The outer scorecard requires constant feeding. The hedonic treadmill ensures that whatever you buy to impress others becomes invisible to you within months. You return to baseline. You require the next purchase to maintain the same level of approval. The cycle is endless. The bill is enormous. The actual approval, when measured honestly, is fleeting, and it never comes from the people whose opinion you were originally trying to win. The inner scorecard requires almost nothing externally. It is satisfied by integrity, by the alignment between your stated values and your daily actions, by saving when no one is watching, by owning what you cannot show, by being, when no one is around, the same person you are when everyone is. There is a brutal hypothetical I sometimes pose to the young people I mentor. Would you rather be the wealthiest person in the room and have everyone think you were broke, or be the poorest person in the room and have everyone think you were wealthy? If you choose the second, you will never accumulate wealth. The choice itself reveals which scorecard is running your nervous system. Stop performing your wealth. Start building it. The two are nearly opposite activities. The performance is expensive, exhausting, and produces nothing durable. The building is quiet, slow, and produces a structure that lasts beyond your lifetime. The moment you stop competing for the outer scorecard is the moment you become free to actually win. Law 6. The law of irreversible decisions. The sixth law is rarely discussed, but it separates those who accumulate from those who perpetually prepare to accumulate. The working person lives in a state of constant optionality. He keeps his options open. He waits for the right moment. He researches, plans, and circles the decision indefinitely, terrified of making the wrong move. This behavior feels like prudence. It is not. It is, in most cases, the sophisticated disguise of fear. The wealthy understand something counterintuitive. Certain decisions, once made irreversibly, generate a momentum that no amount of preparation can replicate. When you burn the boats, the energy you previously spent managing the exit strategy is now entirely redirected toward making the landing work. Jeff Bezos described his framework for major decisions as a regret minimization model. He asked himself, at age 80, looking back, would I regret not having tried? The answer to that question, he found, was almost always more clarifying than any spreadsheet. But the deeper truth is this: He then acted on the answer. He did not continue weighing. He committed. There is a physiological reason this works. The brain, once it registers that a decision is truly final, stops allocating cognitive resources to the alternative. The mental bandwidth, previously consumed by should I or shouldn't I, becomes available for how do I make this succeed? The committed person outperforms the hesitant person not because he is smarter, but because he is running on a different operating system. This does not mean acting without information. It means recognizing the moment when additional information produces diminishing returns. When you are, in effect, paying the cost of delay without the benefit of meaningful new knowledge. The wealthy have trained themselves to recognize that moment and to move through it cleanly. Make the decision. Announce it publicly if you must. Cut off the retreat, not because recklessness is a virtue, but because commitment is a force multiplier that preparation alone can never be. Law 7. The law of self-education. The 7th law retroactively explains all the previous 6. The public curriculum ends. 18 years, 22 years, 26 years if you go to graduate school. And then it stops. You receive a diploma. You walk across a stage. You enter what your professors quietly call the real world. And from that moment forward, almost no one ever asks you to learn anything substantial again. This is the trap. The wealthy never stop the curriculum. They simply replace the imposed curriculum of school with the self-imposed curriculum of adulthood. They become, in their 20s, what your school never trained you to be, the administrator of their own continued education. There is a phrase used by every truly wealthy person I have ever known. I am still learning. Not as a humility line, as an operational fact. They read every day, books on subjects they do not yet understand, books written 50 years ago, books written 2,000 years ago, books on accounting, books on history, books on negotiation, books on the lives of people who built things they do not yet know how to build. A working person reads, on average, less than 1 book per year after leaving school. A wealthy person reads, on average, between 30 and 60. This is not because the wealthy were born loving books. This is because they understood, at some point, that the gap between where they are and where they want to be is almost entirely a gap in knowledge, and that books contain that knowledge, priced at the cost of a lunch. There is a Latin phrase the medieval monks used, lectio divina. It meant the slow, reverent, repeated reading of a single text. They believed that 1 book deeply read was more transformative than 100 books skimmed. They were not wrong about books. They were not wrong about anything. From this day forward, treat every evening of your life as a small classroom. 20 minutes, 30 minutes. The amount is less important than the consistency. A working person who reads 20 pages a day of substantive material, not entertainment, not news, not social media, completes roughly 20 serious books a year. Across 40 years, that is 800 books. The accumulated knowledge of 800 books, deeply absorbed, is sufficient to entirely change your trajectory. The school taught you that learning ends. The unwritten curriculum says learning is the only thing that ever truly begins. Law Mastarmut, the law of asymmetric risk. The 8th law is the one that most directly separates the timid from the wealthy, and it is almost universally misunderstood. The working person has been taught to fear risk, to protect what little he has, to not gamble. This is presented as wisdom. In certain contexts, it is, but the working person has been taught to apply this aversion uniformly. to treat all risk as equal, all exposure as danger, all uncertainty as something to be avoided at any cost. The wealthy operate with an entirely different vocabulary. They do not ask, "Is this risky?" They ask, "What is the ratio between what I can lose and what I can gain?" This is the logic of asymmetric risk. You seek situations where the downside is defined, limited, and survivable. And the upside is open, scalable, and potentially transformative. You do not play games where losing 100 destroys you, and winning 100 is the best possible outcome. You play games where losing 100 is a lesson and winning could be 1,000,000. Warren Buffett's first rule of investing is famously, never lose money. His second rule is, never forget rule number 1. This is often cited as a warning against risk. It is actually a statement about asymmetry. Buffett does not avoid risk. He selects for situations where the margin of safety is wide enough that the downside is containable, while the upside remains disproportionate. He has taken enormous risks across his career. He has simply insisted that they be asymmetric. The practical implication of this law is this: stop trying to protect yourself from all loss. Start engineering your exposure so that your losses are bounded and your gains are not. Take small, survivable bets in new domains. Let the ones that fail teach you. Let the ones that compound run. The investor who makes 10 small bets and loses 7 of them, but allows the 3 winners to run uncapped, often outperforms the investor who makes one large, safe bet and manages it to a modest, certain return. The school taught you to fear the wrong thing. The real danger is not the asymmetric bet that fails. It is the life of symmetric mediocrity, where you neither risk much nor gain much, that ends quietly in financial invisibility. Law 9. The law of value creation. Before extraction. The 9th law is perhaps the most counterintuitive, and it is the one that most cleanly divides the sustainably wealthy from those who merely appear wealthy for a season. The working person is taught, implicitly and explicitly, to think about what he can get: a better salary, a bigger bonus, a higher rate, a larger share. His entire negotiating posture is extractive. He enters rooms asking, consciously or not, "What is in this for me?" The wealthy person enters rooms with a different question. What can I build here that is worth more than what I came with? This is not altruism. It is strategy. The person who creates value before extracting it has, by the time he is ready to be paid, already demonstrated his irreplaceability. He is not negotiating from desperation. He is negotiating from abundance. The leverage is entirely different. John D. Rockefeller did not become wealthy by charging the highest price the market would bear at the earliest opportunity. He became wealthy by making kerosene so affordable and distribution so reliable that he first became indispensable. And then from that position, he extracted on a scale no previous price gouger could have imagined. He created the value. Then he captured it. There's a phrase in venture capital: give before you take. The investors who build the deepest networks are not the ones who pitch hardest and negotiate sharpest at every encounter. They are the ones who spent years making introductions, sharing knowledge, and solving problems for others. With no visible immediate return, by the time they needed a favor, the network was already saturated with goodwill. The practical instruction is this: in every room you enter, in every relationship you form, lead with creation. Solve the problem that hasn't been asked. Deliver more than you promised. Make yourself the person whose departure would cost more than whose arrival anyone anticipated. Once you have done that, Once you have made yourself genuinely valuable, the extraction takes care of itself. No one underpays someone they cannot afford to lose. Law 10. The law of the invisible architecture. The 10th law is the master law. It is the one that wealthy families transmit most deliberately, and working families never transmit at all, because most working families do not know it exists. Every financial outcome, every accumulation of wealth or poverty, every pattern of ownership or servitude, every compounding advantage or compounding disadvantage rests on a structure that was built before the money arrived. The wealthy build the architecture first. The money flows into it. The working person waits for the money to arrive and then tries to figure out the structure afterward. This sequencing error is fatal. What is the invisible architecture? It is the legal, financial, relational, and psychological infrastructure that determines what happens to money when it enters your life. It includes the entity structures that protect assets from predators, the tax strategies that legally retain more of what you earn, the estate mechanisms that transfer wealth across generations without destruction, the insurance scaffolding that prevents a single catastrophe from erasing decades of accumulation, the psychological contracts with yourself and with the people around you that determine whether money will be deployed intelligently or consumed unconsciously. The wealthy do not think about these things when they become necessary. They build them when they are unnecessary, when there is nothing yet to protect, no income yet to shield, no estate yet to transfer. They build the container before filling it. When the wealth arrives, the architecture is already standing. The working person, by contrast, thinks about structure only when forced to, at tax time, at the moment of a lawsuit, at the death of a parent whose estate was not planned. By then, the absence of architecture has already done its damage. The taxman has taken what the entity structure would have protected. The creditor has reached what the trust would have separated. The heir has received not a foundation for their own accumulation, but a contested, diminished fragment, the residue of a life lived without a plan. This law demands that you begin building the container now, regardless of how little there is currently to put inside it. Consult the attorney. Form the entity, open the retirement account, draft the will, not because you are wealthy, but because you intend to be. And the architecture must be ready before the wealth arrives. The school taught you to manage money. The unwritten curriculum says, build the system that manages the money for you. The 10 laws together. Step back with me. The law of the long horizon. Measure your life in decades, not paychecks. The longer the game you play, the smaller the field of competitors becomes. The law of ownership. Accumulate fragments of the world. Do not merely rent it. You are either accumulating ownership or financing someone else's. The law of the hidden network. Choose the room you sit in carefully, because you will slowly become it. Wealth is contagious in the same way poverty is contagious. The law of leverage. Apply force through capital, through labor, and through systems that work without you. The shovel was never the right tool. The law of the inner compass. Replace the outer scorecard with the inner one. Stop performing your wealth and start building it. The two are opposite activities. The law of irreversible decisions. Commitment is a force multiplier that preparation alone can never replicate. Burn the boats. The energy you are spending on the exit strategy is needed for the landing. The law of self-education. The curriculum never ends. Only the imposed one does. Every evening is a small classroom. Begin tonight. The law of asymmetric risk. Stop trying to eliminate risk. Start engineering your exposure so your losses are bounded and your gains are not. The real danger is symmetric mediocrity, the law of value creation. Before extraction, lead with creation in every room you enter. Make yourself indispensable before you negotiate your price. Extraction follows value the way water follows gravity. The law of the invisible architecture. Build the container before the wealth arrives. Legal structures, tax strategies, estate mechanisms, psychological contracts. The wealthy do not build these because they are rich. They became rich in part because they built these first. These are not separate techniques. They are an integrated curriculum, the one that every wealthy family transmits quietly to its children, sometimes formally, most often through observation, almost never in the language of school, the apprenticeship contract. Out of every 100 people who read this, 98 will agree with everything written here. They will feel inspired for an afternoon. They will share this briefly with a friend. And within 72 hours, the curriculum will have faded. Within a week, it will be gone. 2 will change something. Maybe 1 will change everything. I do not know which one of you that is. Neither do you yet. But there is a way to find out within the next 30 days with mathematical certainty. Take a single sheet of paper tonight. Write across the top, the apprenticeship contract. Beneath it, write 4 lines. Line 1. I will purchase within the next 6 months my first fragment of ownership. It can be small. $100 in an index fund. A modest stake in a small business. The size does not matter. The line you cross from renter to owner is the only line that financially ever mattered. Line 2. I will spend this week 1 hour in the presence of someone whose financial life I want to learn from. A coffee with someone older. A long conversation with a relative who built something. A book by an author who actually did the thing they are writing about. Line 3. Beginning tonight, I will read 20 pages a day of substantive material every day for the rest of my life. Not as a goal, as a practice, the way a monk says morning prayers without exception. Line 4. I will identify, this month, 1 decision I have been circling. I will make it. I will announce it to 1 person. And I will direct the energy I was spending on hesitation toward making it succeed. Sign your name. Date it. Tape it somewhere you cannot ignore. The bathroom mirror, the inside of your front door, the first page of the book you are currently reading. 30 days from tonight. Return to the page. Did you cross the ownership line? Did you spend the hour? Did you read the pages? Did you make the decision? The answer to those 4 questions is the answer to whether you will ever be wealthy. The school is closed. The textbooks are returned. The teachers have moved on to next year's class. The unwritten curriculum is still open. The chair is still there. The book is still on the desk. You are the teacher now. You are also the student. Begin the curriculum tonight.